It began as an anomaly, barely a whisper on social media, easy to dismiss as digital folklore. But that changed the night my friends and I saw our own shadows sever their silhouettes from our bodies under the faint glow of the street lamps. Shadows, we soon learned, are not merely absence of light. They're reservoirs of our darkest selves. We were returning from a late movie, laughing off the chill of a horror flick, when Ellie stopped dead in her tracks. "Guys, look!" She pointed at her feet, or rather, where her feet should have been shadowed. Her shadow was drifting away, morphing, stretching into a darker, more sinister version of herself. One by one, we realized we were all unanchored from our silhouettes. Panic, sharp and bitter, clutched at my throat. Why are they moving on their own? Max's voice trembled slightly. "We need to follow them," I said, the decision clawing its way out of me. It wasn't just fear, it was necessity. We knew our shadows better than we wished to admit. They were our envy, our anger, our impulses held at bay. Our pursuit led us down deserted streets and abandoned alleys, the city a spectral version of itself. We watched in horror as our shadows acted out in ways we'd only ever fantasized in our darkest moments. Ellie's shadow screamed at a stranger, face contorted in unwarranted rage. Max's shadow stole from a sleeping homeless man, slipping the few bills from his cup with a sinister glee. Each act was a gut punch, a mirror to the parts of ourselves we fought to control. Then there was my shadow. It stood by a bridge, gazing over the railing into the dark water below, an embodiment of my deepest despair. My heart froze. Was this what lay beneath my jovial exterior? A sadness so profound. "We have to stop them before they go too far," I declared, heart racing, as we regrouped, breathing heavily. "How?" Ellie's eyes were wide, tear-streaked. "We confront them. We confront ourselves." It was a shot in the dark, but instinct told me our shadows fed on the parts of us we suppressed or ignored. Approaching my shadow, I spoke aloud the fears I had never voiced, acknowledging each hidden tear, each silent scream. The others followed, their voices mingling in the cold air, a confession, a catharsis. As we faced our darkest selves, the shadows shivered, flickered, and then, as if our acknowledgement of them had robbed them of their power, they rejoined us, merging back into our forms. The relief was palpable, but the night had changed us. We returned home as the first light of dawn painted the sky, each step heavier than the last. Our shadows were once again mere absences of light, but the darkness they had harbored was now a shared secret among us, a silent acknowledgement of our inner battles. That night, we learned that shadows are not just followers. They are keepers of our hidden depths. In chasing them, we weren't just chasing the dark. We were running towards our own truths, ugly and raw, yet necessary for the light to truly mean anything. And so, in every subsequent shadow cast by our forms, we saw not just darkness, but a reminder. We must embrace all parts of ourselves, the light and the dark, to be whole. I've always had a nose for the obscure, the forgotten tales that lurk in the margins of the city's frenetic pulse. It's my bread and butter as a journalist. When whispers of eerie cries echoing only at night along Elm Street reached my ears, curiosity, mingled with a pinch of bravado, propelled me forward. A hidden gem of a story, perhaps, waiting to be unearthed. Elm Street, cloaked in the ordinariness of daytime, transformed as twilight deepened. The storefronts shuttered early, the streetlights flickered hesitantly, and a palpable hush descended like a cloak. Armed with my recorder and a stubborn streak, I prowled the dimly lit sidewalk, listening. The cries began as a low moan, almost almost lost beneath the city's heartbeat. I stood still, my breath misting in the cold air, as the sounds grew clearer, more distinct, a chorus of despair that twisted around the old buildings like ivy. Each night I returned, drawn by the haunting lament that seemed to seep from the very bricks of the street. My breakthrough came from an old-timer Joe, who tended the bar at the corner. Over a drink too strong for my taste, he leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You hear them cries, son? It's from the old city below, swallowed whole when the new one was built right over it. A whole other world, forgotten." The notion of a buried city intrigued me. Research unearthed old maps that hinted at a sprawling underground network, now abandoned, beneath Elm Street. The next step was inevitable. I found the entrance, cleverly concealed behind the crumbling wall of an old laundromat basement, a gaping maw leading into darkness. Descending was like stepping into another era, the air stale and heavy with silence, disturbed only by my footsteps. The narrow beam of my flashlight revealed glimpses of a life once vibrant. Dusty storefronts, faded signs, remnants of existence. And still, those cries echoed, bouncing off unseen walls, guiding me deeper. The city was a labyrinth, a maze constructed with no apparent logic, designed perhaps to trap the unwary. The cries grew louder, despairing, as if the very shadows wailed for release. I pressed on, driven by a mix of dread and determination. It was in a wide plaza, surrounded by derelict buildings, that I found them, the source of the cries. Not ghosts, as one might expect, but people. Dozens of them, huddled in the darkness, their eyes reflecting my flashlight like animals caught in headlights. Their clothes were ragged, their faces etched with the lines of those long forgotten. One of them, an old woman with hair as white as the silence that fell when I approached, spoke first. "We are the forgotten ones," she rasped, her voice echoing oddly in the still air. "Left here when the world above moved on, abandoned in this eternal night. We cried for help until we forgot why, and only the cries remained." My heart hammered in my chest. The story was bigger, darker than I had imagined. They were not spectral remnants, but flesh and blood, trapped in a time pocket, forgotten by a city bustling above. The challenge then was not just to tell their story, but to right a wrong so profound it had erased these people from existence. I guided them, one by one, back to the entrance I had used, leading them towards the dim light of the modern Elm Street. The emergence of the forgotten people from beneath the street made headlines, disrupting the rhythm of daily life as the city faced its forgotten past. As for me, the cries on Elm Street ceased, replaced by the voices of those once lost, now contributing to the city's ever-evolving story. As I write this, the quiet on Elm Street feels different, a silence filled with the weight of memories and the light of recovered lives. The echoes have ceased, but their whispers linger, a reminder of the stories that hide in the shadows, waiting for someone to listen. In the restless shadows of the city, there exists a corner untouched by the amber glow of street lamps, where night after night, a mysterious vendor sets up his stall. I discovered this spectral figure quite by accident, drawn by the allure of the whispered tales from those few brave enough to wander his way. The vendor, a gaunt figure draped in a tattered overcoat, sold toys that were relics of a bygone era, wooden tops that hummed with an eerie cadence, porcelain dolls with eyes too knowing, and tin soldiers that marched of their own accord when the night deepened. Every piece seemed infused with whispers of the past, as if each had been steeped in secrets no living soul was meant to hear. Drawn in by a blend of curiosity and the thrill of the macabre, I approached his stall one fateful evening. The vendor's eyes, deep and dark as voids, flicked up to meet mine. Without a word, he handed me a marionette. Its paint was that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. That night, I took the marionette home. The air around me felt denser, charged with a static of foreboding as I placed my purchase on the mantel. Sleep eluded me. The house creaked and groaned as though sighing in its slumber. At the stroke of midnight, I heard the faint, almost imperceptible sound of wooden limbs clacking against the brickwork of my fireplace. I rose to investigate, and what I found chilled me to the core. The marionette was not where I had left it. Instead, it dangled from its strings in the center of the room, spinning slowly, its hollow eyes fixed upon mine. Each rotation seemed to beckon me closer, and I felt an inexplicable urge to reach out and touch it. As my fingers brushed against the cold wood, the room spun violently. The walls stretched and the floor buckled, as if the house itself was contorting in agony. When the world finally stilled, I found myself no longer in my familiar surroundings, but standing back on that dark, forsaken street corner. The vendor was there, his grin wide and unwelcoming. "Welcome back," he said, his voice a whisper of leaves. "You're just in time." Around me, figures began to materialize from the shadows, others who had bought his cursed toys. Their eyes were empty, their movements jerky and unnatural, as if they too were marionettes dancing on unseen strings. I tried to run, but my body was no longer my own. My limbs moved against my will, drawing me inexorably back to the vendor's stall. There, the toys danced and whirled, each twist and turn mirroring the despair in the eyes of their owners. With a start, I realized what was happening. We were trapped, bound to the whims of the toys. We had so foolishly welcomed it into our homes. And with each new night, our numbers grew as more succumbed to the vendor's sinister allure. The vendor's laugh, a sound like cracking wood, filled the air as he surveyed his growing collection. "You'll never leave," he whispered, his voice a promise as binding as the strings that now manipulated my every move. As dawn approached, the spectral stall faded from view, and with it any hope of escape. We vanished with the morning mist, destined to reappear with the night, forever part of his dark menagerie. Each evening, we played our parts on the corner, silent sentinels warning off the wise but luring the curious, our souls entwined with the twisted magic of the toys that had ensnared us. And so, if ever you wander by and find a vendor selling curios at night, remember this tale. Walk on, lest you find yourself another lost soul, forever bound to the vanishing vendor's corner.